My name is Gloria Holloway. I'm 69 years old. I live alone in a modest little house in Inglewood, Los Angeles. I was widowed early. I raised my son, Darren, with the little that life has given me and the much that I have taken from myself. I worked cleaning mansions in Bel Air, swallowing dust and silence while dreaming of a better future for him. Now tell me something, looking into my eyes. What kind of son takes every penny that his mother saved in a lifetime and spends everything taking his wife and mother-in-law for a walk in Italy? Maybe you're wondering if I screamed, if I cried, if I went to the police. But I am not a woman of scandal. I am a woman of silence, and it was in silence that I stood up. If you've also felt your heart wither in the face of a betrayal within your own home, so you'll understand every line of that story, because this is not just about money, it's about trust, about what happens when a mother's love becomes a battlefield. Stay with me until the end. You will find that even silence, it may taste like revenge. But before we dive into the heart of this story, I need you to know one thing. There was a day when I opened the bank's app and saw my account zeroed out. $95,000 disappeared without warning. It was everything I had kept silent for decades, sweeping other people's floors, swallowing my pride. With that money, my son, his wife, and his mother-in-law went to Rome. They ate well, toasted in expensive glasses, smiled as if I didn't exist. And when he called me crying, asking for help, I didn't scream. I just smiled. But it wasn't a mother's smile. It was the smile of someone who has already died inside and rose again different. If you've come this far, you may have experienced something similar. And if it touched your heart, I ask you, with all affection, leave a like on this video and subscribe here to the channel. Not for me, but for all the women who have been betrayed in silence. For every mother who was forgotten after giving everything. Telling it hurts. But if I know there's someone out there listening to me, really, it was worth opening this wound. My name is Gloria Holloway, and if you had walked past my sidewalk on any Monday morning, you would have seen me sitting on the porch with a mug of black coffee in my hands and AM radio whispering old news. I always started the day early, even though I wasn't in such a hurry for anything. The habit remained. The biological clock of someone who has worked cleaning mansions for 40 years does not know how to sleep late. Life here in Inglewood was never easy, but I made it worthy. My small house, with creaking windows and an ever-flowering garden, was my refuge, even when everything around me seemed to forget that I existed. My neighbor, Donna, spent almost every weekend here. She brought banana cake. I made tea. We spoke little. Two women used to filling silence with memory. She always said, "Gloria, you have mother's hands, but the eyes of those who are tired of taking care of them." I smiled. Just smile, because it was true. In the living room, Darren's portraits dominated the bookshelf. He was small, in a school uniform. He, with his college diploma, smiling with the world in his eyes. He with Tanya, in what seemed to be a promising start. I hadn't changed those photo frames in years. Even though my heart knew what my eyes refused to accept. That boy had become a man, but he did not know how to become a son. I remember, as if it were today, the first time I felt that life was asking too much of me. That's when I sold my wedding ring to pay for the first semester of daycare. A simple ring, but it carried the only love that made me feel like a woman before I became just a mother. After that, I turned down 2 dating requests. One of them was from Mr. Howard, the baker on the corner, who swore he would make me laugh every day, but I didn't want to. How could I think of love when Darren still needed new sneakers for physical education? I was cleaning houses in Bel Air, where the bathrooms were bigger than my living room. Many times he returned home with his back locked but with a warm heart, because every dollar was for him. A book, a backpack, a dental treatment. There was a year when I sold plasma twice a week to pay for a summer course, and I never complained. Never. Because being a mother, for me, has always been more honor than burden. But the neighborhood saw all this with respect. They called me Donna Gloria, even the younger ones. When they passed by and saw my gate open, they stopped to talk. I offered lemonade or a piece of cornmeal cake, and they all said the same thing. "You're one of the last, Gloria, of those real women." I listened with that short smile of someone who was praised too late. And deep down, I clung to one thought, that one day Darren would realize, that one day he would bring his grandchildren more often, that he would call me just to ask how I was, that he would sit down with me, without haste, to hear about the times when television was black and white and love was a letter in the mail. But his phone grew quieter and quieter. Visits are rare, and even so, I dressed up. She painted her nails light pink, put on perfume. He made roast chicken as he liked. Sometimes, I waited sitting with the napkin on my lap, and time passed. Only time. There is a time in life when the silence of the house speaks louder than any words, and it is in this silence that the truth lives. Sometimes, the love we give doesn't come back. Sometimes we raise children, who then act as if they were raised by strangers. If you've ever felt that pain of not being recognized by those you help the most, comment below, "I believe," or "I've lived it," just so I know that I'm not alone in this memory. But at that time I still believed. I was still waiting. She still made coffee for two, even though she lived alone. But time is a clock that teaches, and mine began to show me that something was coming. A great pain. A disappointment so deep that not even tears would know how to get out. And it was on a sunny Tuesday in Inglewood that everything began to change. And you won't believe what I found out that day. The first thing that changed was the silence. Not that comfortable silence of my house, which I already knew well, but a strange silence, coming from the cell phone. Darren, who used to call me in the middle of the day to ask if I had seen the new episode of that home improvement show, stopped calling. At first I thought it was the work. Then, that it was tiredness. But when I sent him a message asking if he would come on Sunday as usual, he only replied the next day with a, "Let's see." It was short, dry, as someone who responds by obligation. That sweet mother that came before the messages disappeared. I tried not to overthink it. Mother, when she loves, has this flaw. She makes excuses for her son even when the world is already warning her. The next time he came here, he brought Tanya, and she brought a look, the kind that measures you from top to bottom and makes you feel small inside your own home. He greeted without touching, as if the air inside was too dusty. I served roast beef, fresh rice, all made with the same seasoning as always, but she barely touched the plate. He said he was trying to eat cleaner. Darren laughed, a little embarrassed. Then, while I was collecting the glasses, I heard her whisper, "This house looks like an old movie set, right?" I pretended I didn't hear, but every word beat in my chest as if it had been said loud and clear. And it was on that day that I met Candace, the mother-in-law. She arrived the following week, with the air of someone who never smiles, and eyes that seemed to look for fault in everything. He looked at me from above, as if he were evaluating an old piece of furniture. He made a comment that still echoes inside today. "Darren, you need to cut that umbilical cord. It's time to think about your own future." She said it right in front of me, like I was a burden, as if the woman who raised him with bleeding hands was now an obstacle for him to grow up. Darren said nothing. He didn't even look at me. He just buttered the bread as if it were the most natural thing in the world. I should have said something. But what does a mother say at a time like this? I laughed. A short, unfunny laugh. The laughter of someone who is swallowing a scream. I got up, went to the kitchen, closed the door carefully and took a deep breath. It was as if a crack had opened up inside me, but I still wanted to believe that it was my exaggeration, that maybe it was just a phase, an adaptation, that I needed to understand that he had a new family now, other priorities. But the coldness didn't stop there. I began to notice that he always avoided coming alone, always with Tanya or in a hurry. I called saying, "We won't be able to pass it there today, Mom. Tomorrow we'll talk." And tomorrow turned into a week. Then it turned into a month. And when he came, he spent more time on the phone than with me. I asked him about the work. He answered with a word. I would ask about the boys, and he would say, "It's okay." The conversation was a narrow corridor. I walked alone through it. And mind you, I didn't need gifts, trips, or long visits. I just wanted a little attention, a sincere look, a long hug. But with each new visit, I felt like I was becoming a decorative piece, one that they didn't know where else to put it, but still didn't have the courage to throw away. The last time they came, Tanya commented, looking at the ceiling, "I think this house would have potential, with a good renovation. But the way it is, it devalues the neighborhood." I looked at her. I wanted to answer. I wanted to ask since when my home had become an obstacle to house prices. But Darren stepped forward, with that muffled giggle. She's attached, Tanya. Don't mess with it. And once again, no one asked me anything. I was there, but it was like an old picture on the wall, present, but ignored. After they left, I walked around the room. I ran my fingers through the furniture. I touched the portraits. Everything that existed there had a history. The couch where Darren learned to tie his shoe. The carpet where he fell when he took his first steps. The wall where I marked its height year after year. And now it was all old, ugly, outdated. No, it was not the house that had lost value. It was me. Still, I kept silent. I kept tidying up the house as if he was going to come back and see everything with his eyes as before. I prepared his favorite soup the other day. I froze because I thought he might appear by surprise. He didn't show up, and it was on any given afternoon, between a cup of tea and a look at the clock, that I began to realize. My son was no longer coming here for love. He came out of obligation, or out of interest. And that, my people, hurts more than any damn word. But was I seeing it all wrong? Or could it be that, deep down, the truth had been poking me for a long time, and I who refused to look? Because what happened next? It took me off the ground. And that's when I discovered how much blind love can cost dearly. Very expensive. Last Christmas, I set the table for 4. The red candles lit, the smell of the shank spreading through the house, and an apple pie cooling in the window, just the way Darren liked it. I even put the cutlery that I only use on special dates. I sat waiting. The hand of the clock was moving slowly. 9, 10, 11 at night. No one showed up. I sent a message, called. Nothing. It wasn't until the next day, around noon, that he replied, "I'm sorry, Mom. It turned out that we spent the night at Candace's house. It was all rushed. Is that it? No Merry Christmas? No, do you want me to stop by later?" I read that message about 10 times, trying to find a piece of affection. There wasn't. Only the dry neglect of those who forgot that I exist. After that, he started to touch on a subject that chilled my spine. The house. "Mom, you should put the house in my name. It gets easier if one day you get sick, if something happens. It avoids bureaucracy." I pretended I didn't understand. He changed the subject. He said that it was not yet time for that, but he insisted. And when Tanya found out that the house was still in my name alone, she let out a muffled laugh and said, "Lucky for you, your mother is old and absent-minded." I heard it from the bedroom. The phrase echoed in my head for days and days. Tanya also began to create distance between me and the grandchildren. Before, they spent 1 weekend a month with me. Now, she said that children find the smell of your house strange, or get bored without Wi-Fi. Once I asked if I could pick them up on Saturday. She replied, "It's better not. They are in a very agitated phase." Since when is an agitated grandson a reason not to see his grandmother? What was she trying to hide? Or take? That's when I started to notice a pattern. Darren's calls only came with requests. "Mom, can you help with car insurance this month? Mom, we're thinking about renovating the kitchen. Can you borrow $5,000? And I did. I always did. Because I thought, it's temporary. It's just a phase. Soon he stabilizes. But inside me, something was already beginning to weigh down. A feeling that I was being used. That the love I gave was now only a means of support, not a true bond. But the biggest wound came on any Wednesday. I had made stroganoff, his favorite food. I prepared it carefully, put it in a jar with a red lid, still hot. I took the bus and went to the building where Darren lived with Tanya. I entered the lobby, said good morning to the doorman, and said I wanted to go upstairs. He looked at me with a mixture of shame and discomfort. "Donna Gloria, I'm sorry, but Mr. Darren left guidance not to go up anyone without warning beforehand. Neither do you." That hit me hard. I smiled, embarrassed. He said it was fine, and I left there with the pot still in my hands. The smell of stroganoff seemed to follow me like a ghost. I returned home by bus, looking out the window without seeing anything. When I entered, I put the jar in the fridge and sat in the dark room. I didn't cry. I just stood there, motionless, and for the first time, I whispered to myself, "Is he ashamed of me?" That was like a needle going through the heart. The woman who worked cleaning other people's bathrooms, who gave up love, who carried the weight of 2 to create 1. Now he couldn't even go up to his own son's apartment? I still tried to justify it. I told myself that maybe he was tired, that Tanya was stressed, that the boys were sick, that the modern world was too busy, but the truth had been staring at me for a long time, and I kept looking away. And I ask, how many mothers out there continue to cover their ears to what their hearts are already screaming? Because mine screamed, in silence, but I still didn't know that the worst was to come. And when I found out what he did to my bank account, neither the stroganoff, nor the portraits, nor the years of sacrifice were able to console me. Do you want to know what he did? So get ready, because it was there that love died, and another Gloria was born. That morning seemed like all the others. The sun passed through the cracks in the curtain. The smell of my black coffee filled the kitchen, and I was getting ready for another simple day. I sat in the armchair, put on my glasses, and opened the bank's app to check if the retirement deposit had fallen. That's when my eyes locked. Available balance, 0 zeros. I thought it was an app error. I pressed it to update. Nothing. I opened and closed. Nothing. My hands began to tremble, but not because of age. It was a tremor that came from within, from the soul itself. I called the bank with my voice stuck in my throat. I explained that there was a mistake, that account was my life's savings, that nothing could have disappeared like that. The attendant, with that coldness that only those who work with numbers have, read the movements. There were several digital transfers, ma'am, all to an account in Darren Holloway's name. My heart stopped. The world has become small. I asked for the final amount. She replied, 95,000, ma'am. I only heard the number, 95,000. Every hour of sweat, every back pain, every morning we wake up before the sun, every waiver, every sacrifice, everything evaporated. I continued on the line, not knowing what to say. The girl also asked if I wanted to file a fraud complaint. I just hung up. I stared at nothing, holding the cell phone as if it burned. Minutes later, the landline rang. I answered in the most neutral voice I could. It was Donna, my excited neighbor, talking with that enthusiasm that only those who don't know about the tragedy feel. Gloria, did you see Darren's Instagram? Girl, he's in Rome. He posted a photo just now. Tanya and her mother are with him, drinking fancy wine. I closed my eyes. The silence inside me turned into a desert. My mouth was half open, but no sound came out. I thanked Donna, hung up slowly, and walked to my room. I stopped in front of the wardrobe. I opened the drawer where I keep my old cell phone, the one without a case, all scratched. I sat on the edge of the bed, opened the app, and looked up his name. My son, Darren. My boy, the only one. There was the photo. Him, with a glass of wine raised, next to Tanya and Candace, smiling as if the world was perfect. The caption read, Rome, my new beginning, new life, new beginning, with my money, with my old age, with everything I had saved so as not to be a burden to anyone. I also saw Tanya's comments. Good things come to those who deserve it. I felt my heart wither, but I didn't cry. I didn't cry. Not a drop. I just sat on the bed, put the phone next to me, and stayed there. Stop. My eyes stared at the ground, but my mind raced in 1,000 directions. The pain was so deep that not even my breath seemed to belong to me. And this is where I need to tell you something before continuing. I'm here opening my heart, telling my true story, with all that is beautiful and ugly. So, if you're still listening to me, leave a like and subscribe to the channel. This is not by numbers. It's just for me to know that there is someone on the other side accompanying me, because reliving all this hurts more than it seems. I spent hours in that room. The light was changing, the sun set, and I remained in the same place, seeing nothing and feeling everything. I didn't scream. I didn't care about him. I didn't ask for an explanation. I didn't break anything. I just existed, like someone who has just lost a part of themselves. And at the same time, as someone who begins to understand something that was being pushed under the rug for a long time. Because there, on that silent night, while the whole house seemed to be watching me, I felt that something inside me had died. But the scariest thing was not that. That's what was born in the place. And you still don't know what I did next. Because there is a very important detail in this story, and it changes everything. That next morning, the house seemed bigger than ever. I walked through the room slowly, as if looking for something, but without knowing what. The ground creaked beneath my feet, and each crack was like a whisper of life reminding me of what I had lost. It wasn't just the money, it was respect, trust, the sun. I went to the living room, ran my fingers over the old portraits. Darren in blue overalls, smiling toothless in first grade. Darren at the school dance. Darren on graduation day, in a gown, hugging me as if the world were ours. So many versions of him living in that wall, none like the man who robbed me. I entered his room, the same one where he grew up. He still had the marks of the stickers he pasted on the wall, the desk with the stuck drawers, the old books from when he said he wanted to be a doctor. I opened the little box that I keep in the back of the closet. Inside, the clippings of his report cards, the drawings he made in kindergarten, the first letter he wrote to me saying, "Mom, you are the best in the world." I held that yellowed sheet in my hands. For a moment, I wanted to go back in time. I wanted that boy to still exist, but all that remained was paper and dust. I went back to the kitchen, took my recipe book, the one with the red cover stained with grease and love, and opened it to a blank page. I picked up the blue pen, took a deep breath, and wrote at the top of the page, "Today my account died, but I was the one who really died." Then I closed the notebook calmly, as if closing a chapter. But take your time. No drama. I didn't cry. I didn't make a scandal. I just let the silence work inside me. In the days that followed, the house continued as usual, but I stopped leaving the porch light on at night. Before, it was a habit, a hope, a way of saying, if he comes, the light will guide. Not anymore. Now there was no one I was expecting. The phone rang less, and even when it did, I let it ring. I started to spend the mornings without opening the curtain. The radio went silent. The coffee cooled in the mug. I walked around the house without a destination, just following the movement of life so as not to rust my body. Donna stopped by 2 days later. He clapped his hands at the gate, with a cake in his hands and his usual smile. He said, "I saw a news report about Rome and remembered your son. It's beautiful there, isn't it?" I just smiled. I said I wasn't very well, that I needed to rest. She respected it. He hugged me lightly, as if he felt that something was wrong, but he didn't ask, and he left, and I went back to my silence. That's when something started to change, not from the outside in, but from the inside out. I stopped justifying. I stopped looking for excuses for him. I stopped wondering what I did wrong. No, it wasn't my fault. I gave everything. I even gave what I didn't have, and yet, he chose to treat me as invisible. And the truth is that we only become invisible to those who have already decided to look the other way. Over time, I stopped cooking on Sundays. Before, I used to set a table, with cloth napkins and fresh juice. Now, a slice of bread and a bitter coffee were enough. I stopped calling the boys' school to ask if they were okay, not out of revenge, but because I understood that my presence was no longer welcome. It was like an old painting, beautiful to look at from afar, but uncomfortable if left in the main room. At night, I went to bed without praying, not for lack of faith, but because my prayer had already turned into an outburst, and venting is tiring. I closed my eyes and listened to the ticking of the clock in the living room. Every second was like a hammer marking the time I wasted trying to be everything to someone who never tried to be half for me. And then, on a freezing Friday night, I dreamed about my husband. He was sitting on the porch, looking at me with that calm smile he always had. In the dream, he was holding a sheet of paper. He would give me in and say, "There's still time, Gloria." I woke up with my heart racing. I sat on the bed, in a cold sweat. I looked to the side. Nothing but emptiness. But those words remained. There's still time. And that's when the idea began to be born. Small, subtle, almost imperceptible, but strong, like a root breaking through the concrete underneath. Can you imagine what goes on in the head of a betrayed, silent mother? And wound? Well, I found out. And what I did next. No one was expecting it, especially him. That week, I decided to go through my old folders. It was something I did sometimes, to reorganize the paperwork, review documents, separate what I still needed to keep. It had a blue folder, with crooked labels and pages yellowed by time. Inside, old statements, proof of retirement, the deed to the house, everything there. But what caught my attention was a brown envelope, without a name, without a stamp. Inside it, there were copies of bank forms. One of them said, "Joint current account," with the names Gloria Holloway and Darren Holloway. I stopped. I leaned against the chair. I read it again. My name was there, but I didn't remember signing anything. I grabbed my glasses, turned on the living room light, sat at the table, and started comparing the signatures. One of them, it felt like mine, but there was something wrong. He had firmer features than mine usually have. I tremble slightly when I sign. Age stuff. That signature did not tremble. It was my handwriting, but it was not my hand. That's when I remembered Brenda, my neighbor on the back street, retired accountant, one of those who see error in a number 10 meters away. The next day, I knocked on her door. I took the papers, told a piece of the story, without going into the most painful details. She analyzed the documents calmly, running her finger over the stamps, reading each line as if sewing a wound, and then she looked at me, with an expression I hadn't seen since I buried my husband. He said, in a low voice, "Gloria, this was done without you. This is serious." I returned home with the documents under my arm, my stomach upset and my head spinning. I spent the night awake, sitting in the armchair in the living room, listening to the ticking of the clock as if it were a drum. The next day, I made a decision. I grabbed the briefcase, got ready, put on my lilac button-down blouse, the one I only wear when I need to look strong, and went to Walter's house. An old friend, a retired lawyer, who used to play dominoes with my husband on the porch, before time took him away. Walter received me with the same tired smile as always. He offered coffee, we sat at the kitchen table, and I handed over the papers. "Analyze it for me, Walter," with the eyes of a lawyer, not a friend. He spent almost an hour in silence, reading everything. I turned over a sheet, made notes on a notepad, and then he looked up. He didn't smile. He just said, "Gloria, this is falsification. This is a crime, federal crime. And if he moved this account without your knowledge, with a fake signature, he not only stole from you, he framed you without you knowing." I felt a shiver go up my back, but I didn't make a scandal. I took a deep breath. I looked at the bottom of the coffee cup, and then at him, and that's when I let go, with a calmness that even I didn't know existed in me. So he stole it, in a hurry. Now I'm going to answer, with patience. It was the first time, in this whole story, that I felt something different from grief. It was firmness. It was not revenge. It was justice. And it didn't come with a shout. It came with time, with strategy, with silence. And here, my friend, if you've made it to this point in history, stay with me until the end. Because what comes after that, it will show you that even the most peaceful woman, when she discovers the truth, becomes a force that no one can hold. Walter helped me sort out what I needed. He guided me on how to proceed. He said that, if I wanted, I could file a lawsuit, but it also gave me an option that no one expected. And it was from there that my plan began to be born. A subtle plan, invisible, done on time. Do you want to know what I did with this truth? And what did Darren discover too late? So wait, because the next step was where everything turned. While Darren posted photos in Rome, toasting with white wine on a balcony overlooking the Colosseum, I spent my afternoon sitting in the living room with my new red notebook on my lap. It was hardcover, thin lines, bought at the stationery store on the corner, as if choosing a companion. There I wrote everything. Not only what happened, but what I felt, which hurt, what was still bleeding. On each page, a part of me was sewn back together. No rush, in silence. I didn't cry anymore. But he didn't smile either. It was as if he was in mourning, not for a living child, but for a mother who was murdered by ingratitude. And on those afternoons, the memories came like ghosts. I remembered the mornings when I left for work before the sun came up, 8 months pregnant, taking 2 buses to clean the house of a famous actress in Beverly Hills. I remember one time when, so tired, I slept standing against the wall of the laundry room. I came home with my legs so swollen that I couldn't bend my knees. But still, I made dinner for Darren. He was 6 years old. I needed to eat. There was a time when I slept on the sofa in the living room for 2 years in a row. Not because of lack of bed, but because I sold my bed to buy his. Boys need to sleep well, otherwise they won't grow well, I said. As he grew, I shrank. Every choice of mine was made to put him 1 step higher. And even when I had to sell plasma for 6 months twice a week to buy his new uniform, I would say to myself, it's going to be worth it. But now, each of these memories seemed to mock me. Each sacrifice became a double-edged sword, because I wasn't rewarded with affection. I was reciprocated with distance, with contempt, with theft. And there's one thing that only those who have been betrayed by someone they loved too much will understand. What hurts the most is not what they take away from you. It's what they deny you after you've given everything. If you know what this is, comment below, "I know how it is," or "I understand you." Sometimes, just knowing that someone has lived the same way already relieves the weight that we carry inside. But as I relived my ghosts, something began to change on the other side of the ocean. Walter had warned me. Sometimes, those who run too fast stumble on their own plan. And indeed, cracks began to appear in Darren's paradise. He sent me a short message on a Wednesday. "Hi, Mom. Is everything okay there?" The first message in weeks. I didn't answer. 2 hours later, another. "Tanya is a little strange. He has been talking to her mother in Italian, and they always lower their tone when I enter the room." Silence. The next day, I found a strange document in the room. It looked like something from a Swiss bank. Are they looking to open an account in Geneva? I just read it. Noticed. I didn't react, because now, time was on my side. While he began to suspect who shared the bed, I was already sure who slept with his own lies. And all I had to do was wait, because what I was preparing, I was going to put each piece in the right place. Can you imagine what happens when those who have always been underestimated decide to act intelligently and silently? That's that. It's time to find out. Because I still haven't told you what I did with that red notebook. And it was there that my plane began to breathe. It was supposed to be just a trip to the hospital. A silly slip on the sidewalk. A scraped knee. No big deal. Neighbor Donna insisted that I go check. And as the pain didn't go away, I ended up going. "It's just in case, Gloria," she said, as she helped me into her husband's truck. I went to the Cedars-Sinai outpatient clinic in West Hollywood. The hospital looked like a city, white light everywhere, people in a hurry, the smell of alcohol in the air. They attended me quickly, took an x-ray of my knee, and when they saw my medical record, old, outdated, they asked to do some general exams. Routine, they said. Pressure, blood, heart. I, without knowing anything, accepted. I waited in the cold room with a thin blanket over my shoulders. I remembered the time when I went to the same hospital with little Darren, when he had pneumonia. I remember how I held his hand and said, "It will pass, son. Mom's here." Now, I was the patient, and no one was there to hold my hand. Took. And when the doctor came back, I already knew that it was not light. He sat facing me, put on his glasses, and looked me in the eyes. "Gloria, we found something in your exams. You have leukemia, advanced stage. Due to the progression of the disease, we estimate something around 6 months. 6 months. The words floated in the air like a sentence. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just nodded. He started to explain treatment, protocols, possibilities, but I didn't listen anymore. I only heard the sentence. 6 months. Time turned into a sigh. The wall behind him began to get far away. Everything around is gone. I left the hospital alone. I didn't call a taxi. I didn't care about anyone. I walked. It was a hot afternoon in Los Angeles. Bright sun, the asphalt shining. I went through an elementary school. I stopped at the gate for a moment. It was similar to where Darren went to school. I remembered the blue uniform, the lunchboxes I prepared with hidden notes. "Mommy loves you." I remembered when I first took him, holding his hand too tight, afraid to leave him in the world. I protected him from everything, everyone's. And now, who protected me? I kept walking. I passed in front of a dress store that I always admired. Expensive, long dresses, full of shine. I never bought any. I never entered. I always thought, this is for other women, not for me. I kept walking. A group of young people ran by with coffee in their hands, laughing out loud, talking about travel, about life. And there I was, with 6 months on my back, and my body already tired of waiting for what never came. I got home, opened the gate, entered. I took off my shoes at the door, as always. I went to the kitchen, passed through the living room, as if I were walking in a place that no longer belonged to me. I sat in the chair at the dining table. I took the red notebook. I opened it on a new page, and I wrote, in firm handwriting, for the first time without trembling, "Today I died inside. But I'm not going to spend my last few months asking for love. I'm going to use them to do justice. I closed the notebook. I took a deep breath. And there, at that moment, I stopped being just a mother. Only grandmother. Only women. I became what they never expected. Someone with limited time and with nothing left to lose. Now tell me, what do you think a woman like me can do with all this pain in here? Because the answer comes at the next turn. And Darren, you won't see it coming. I woke up different that Sunday. The sun was beating down the kitchen window, just like every other day. But inside me, there was something new. It was not peace. It was something else. A kind of cold, clean, silent certainty. It didn't hurt like it used to. The sorrow did not throb. It was as if it had become a smooth stone, a fixed point within me that now guided me. I looked at myself in the mirror as I combed my thinning hair, and for the first time, I didn't see a mother betrayed. I saw a woman who didn't owe anyone anything else, nor explanations, nor silence, nor tears. I calmly got ready. I put on a light lipstick, put on my blue high-waisted pants, and the striped blouse I got from Brenda on my last birthday. I took the folder with the documents and went to Walter's house. He received me with that look that already knew what was coming. I didn't have to repeat everything. I just said, "Walter, I want to continue with the complaint." He didn't ask why. He just shook his head, took the paper, and started to organize everything. Signature forgery, fraudulent use of elderly woman's account, appropriation of assets, and a few more words that I don't even remember now, but that, together, formed the portrait of what he did to me. I left Walter's house lighter. It was as if I had handed over a burden, not to be forgotten, but to be treated with the justice it deserves. I went back home and did something I had avoided for months. I opened all the drawers, all the closets. I reviewed every paper, every document, every letter. I separated everything that was important. I made copies. I organized them in numbered envelopes. One stayed with me. Another one I gave to Brenda, my accountant neighbor. And the third I left with Walter. Not because I expected something bad to happen, but because I already knew that hope was a luxury I could no longer afford. In the following days, I became another. Every call I made, every email sent, every data conference. It was like putting together a puzzle. Only this time, the final picture was my own liberation. I called the bank, the notary's office, the administrator of the old account. I asked for statements, dates, stamps. I asked for audios, traces. I learned things that I didn't even know existed. I found myself in my late 70s, sitting in front of the old laptop Darren gave me years ago, cross-referencing information more accurately than many young people would. And then I realized I was never weak. I was just distracted, too busy loving someone who has never seen me in full. But now I saw it, everything. And for the first time, Darren was no longer my darling son. He was a case to be solved, a page I needed to turn, firmly, not angrily. And look, if this piece of my life can become a mirror or a hug for someone, help me carry it forward. Like and subscribe here to the channel. It makes more difference than you think, because telling this here is more than venting. It's survival. And sometimes, a story told at the right time, save those who are silent. At the end of that week, I received confirmation of the registered complaint. The document arrived in the mail. I took the envelope calmly, opened it in the kitchen, read everything, and then kept it in the third drawer of the shelf, where I keep everything that matters. I took a deep breath and sat down in the chair. He was in no hurry. Time was now my ally. But there's something I haven't told you yet. Because while I was organizing here, something began to crumble there in Europe. And Darren, he had no idea what awaited him on the other side of the ocean. Are you ready to know what Candace, the mother-in-law, was preparing behind the scenes? Because what she did, it saved me work. I remember well the day I sat with Walter and Brenda at the kitchen table, the gray briefcase in front of us. It was a muggy afternoon. The fan was spinning slowly, and the 3 glasses of mint tea were sweating over the cork rests. It didn't look like a scene of revenge, nor of drama. It was just a lady with 2 faithful friends, assembling a dossier. We call it that. The dossier of glory. 50 pages, maybe more. Each one with dates, numbers, tastings, statements, screenshots of Darren's social networks, where he bragged about the wines, the dinners, the new life. Next to it, official documents with my forged signature, suspicious movements, and even audios recovered from my old cell phone, where he asked for my password in a soft voice. Brenda reviewed everything with the technical eye of someone who had been an accountant for 30 years. Walter, with the patience of a lawyer who has seen it all, but is still surprised by the wickedness disguised as affection. And me? I was different. He no longer trembled. He did not hesitate. The red notebook was on my lap, open on a blank page, the pen in hand. And every time a new test was fitted, I wrote a short sentence, like someone sewing a fabric. Everything he did now has a shape. It was then that Walter suggested something that changed everything. He had an old acquaintance, a federal agent in Washington, D.C., who now worked in elder protection and financial crime. He called him in front of us. He explained the case, read parts of the dossier, and on the other end of the line came the answer that made me close my eyes for a moment. With this material, we can trigger the federal safety clause, freeze suspicious accounts, even abroad. It was as if, after so long, someone had lit a flashlight inside my dark tunnel. Over the next few weeks, I learned what I never thought I would know. I studied banking terms. I found out what interstate fraud is. I learned how to track a digital transfer in 5 different countries. Brenda laughed and said, "Gloria, you're going to become a finance teacher." And I answered, looking at the notebook, "No, I'm just learning to defend what's mine." It was at that time that I understood something important. Justice is not done by shouting. It is done in patience, in detail, in the organization, in the precision of someone who has little time and no hurry. Every time I came back from a meeting with Walter, I would sit on the porch, look up at the Inglewood sky, and think, they thought I was old, but I still have claws. And if you're still here listening to me, know, the strongest moment in this story is yet to come. Because one thing is the silence of a mother. Other, it is the roar of a woman who has nothing left to lose. And it was then that we received the news that the accounts in Rome and Switzerland were frozen, the ones in Darren's name, and Tanya. But there was a bill that no one expected, an account opened with just Candace's name. And what was inside? It would change the course of everything. Do you have any idea what she hid? Because I found out. And when he knew, I also knew that my plan was just beginning. It was on a cloudy morning that Brenda arrived at my door with an expression I hadn't seen since her husband passed away. He had an envelope in his hands, crumpled from holding so much. "Gloria, you need to see that." We sat at the kitchen table, as usual. She opened the envelope carefully, took out the papers, and spread them out before me. I was cross-checking the last transactions, those digital files that Walter got access to via the federal agent, and I found it here. I took the paper and began to read slowly, syllable by syllable, as if reading the sentence itself. Application for registration of property as a joint family investment. The document was in Darren's name, but it included my house, my home, and the passage that made me close my eyes for a moment. Justification. Mrs. Gloria Holloway shows signs of impaired cognitive health and emotional fragility, not being able to manage her own assets. I was silent. Brenda looked at me carefully, waiting for any reaction. I took a deep breath, put the paper on the table, and said, "Just this." Then he would bury me alive. It was as if, after having robbed me of my money, my trust, my presence, he now wanted to erase my name from the house I built with every penny of sweat. It wasn't enough to leave me alone. He wanted to make me invisible, legally. Walter confirmed the seriousness. "This is an attempt at fraudulent guardianship. If he had managed to register this in the county, you would have lost control of your house, and it could not reverse it without a long legal fight." The plan was all outlined, and this time, with the stamp of lies painted with bureaucracy. He wanted me to be like an old piece of furniture within my own story, useful only to make weight. I went to the window. The sky is still gray, the leaves falling from the front magnolia, and for a moment, I went back to a day many years ago, when I bought that house. I remember it as if it were now. Darren was still small. I saved every penny for 10 years. I cleaned 3 houses a day, sold my engagement ring, ate plain rice for weeks. On the day the contract was signed, I went alone to the registry office. I wore a blue dress that I sewed myself. I left there with the key in my hand and a dream in my chest. Sighs, reflective. No, there are memories that we keep in such a deep corner of our chest, that sometimes we even forget that they are there, but all it takes is a piece of paper, a sentence, a lie, and everything comes back. With smell, with taste, with tears in the corner of the eye. Request for comment. And you, do you have any memories like this? That marked you in a way that never left? If so, tell me here in the comments. It can be just a phrase like, I remember this, or I've been through something similar. Sometimes, sharing a memory, it is the most beautiful way to heal another. That same day, after Brenda and Walter left, I sat on the edge of my bed, the red notebook on my knees, and I wrote, he didn't just want what was mine. He wanted to erase who I was. That was it. And at that moment, my plan was no longer just justice. It gained a greater purpose. I no longer fought just for myself. She fought for all the women who have already been silenced inside her own home. For all those who were called unfit, old, obstacles. I was going to show that age does not erase intelligence, that tenderness is not synonymous with weakness. And what silence? It can be the loudest sound when it comes loaded with dignity, but do you want to know what gave me the strength to continue this plan until the end? I discovered something Darren himself sent me, inadvertently, and that's what turned the tide. You can't even imagine what was in that email, but I read it, and he smiles, because it was all I needed to complete the dossier. Back in Rome, the sun was beginning to set when Darren held out his card to the waiter, certain that everything was under control. It was an expensive restaurant, one of those with a thin glass, low light, and classical music in the background. Tanya smiled, feigning charm. Her mother-in-law, Candice, drank red wine as if she owned the world. The waiter swiped the card once, 2, 3, and then he bowed slightly and said in that heavy Italian accent, Mi dispiace, signore. Rifiutata letter. Rejected. The silence at the table was the loudest of all. Tanya crossed her arms, stared at Darren with razor-sharp eyes. Did you bring us here to embarrass ourselves? He said, louder than he needed. Candace let out a venomous giggle. He should have let me pay. But there are men who like to pretend they can. He stood there, disconcerted, trying to open the bank's app on his cell phone. The connection stuck. Sweat poured from his forehead. When he finally managed to access it, there was the notification. Account temporarily restricted for international transactions. Contact your institution. He called the customer service number. They spoke vaguely, said that investigations were ongoing, and that, for security, some accounts had been frozen indefinitely. No direct answer. No immediate solution. Desperate, he left the restaurant without talking to anyone. He walked the cobblestone streets, stumbling over his own pride. The cell phone weighed on his hands, but he knew that only one person could understand what was happening. He called me. It was late here in Inglewood when the phone rang. I saw his name on the screen and let it ring a whole time before answering. Hello, Mom? His voice was already choked. It's me. I have a problem. Are you okay, son? My voice came out calm, low, unhurried. No, I'm not. I'm stuck here. The bank blocked everything. I can't pay for the hotel or buy a ticket. Tanya is furious. Candace is gone. And I need you. Please. I was silent. The time of a whole breath. I heard the noise of cars passing on the other side of the line. His suppressed crying. The sound of the foreign city in the background. So, I said only one thing. Now you know what it's like to have no one. And I hung up. I didn't scream. I didn't complain. I didn't explain. I just turned it off. I sat there in the armchair in the living room, facing the old portrait of him in his school uniform, and I felt for the first time that justice does not need a stage. Sometimes she just needs silence. He tried to call again, thrice. I didn't answer. Then she texted, Mom, please talk to me. But I didn't answer, because in that moment, for the first time, he began to understand what it means to be left behind. What does it mean to trust someone, and that someone does not come? He got a taste of what made me live for months: abandonment, impotence, loneliness in the middle of the noise. But believe me, this was still just the beginning, because the next day, when Darren was able to talk to Candace, his world fell apart for good, and what she revealed, it took the floor even from him. Do you have any idea what she was able to hide all this time? Because when I knew, I saw that my justice would not come from me alone. It would come from where you least expect it. That morning, I put on my beige linen dress, the same one I wore to Darren's christening, and walked to Walter's office with steady steps. The sun was high, but the wind was blowing lightly, as if the world suddenly respected my silence. I sat down in front of him, signed the papers with calm hands. It was the end of a story that I had carried on my shoulders since I gave birth to that boy, and the beginning of another, where I was no longer the mother asking for attention, but the woman deciding her limits. From that moment on, Darren no longer had access to anything that was mine, neither to my account, nor to my data, nor to my story. Walter had everything recorded, each line, every refusal, every official block. He also filed the full dossier with Adult Protective Services here in Los Angeles, the official protection for elderly victims of financial abuse. Everything is done as the law dictates, with copies, stamps, and deadlines. I returned home with the briefcase under my arm, and my heart free. For the first time in a long time, I felt light. I took a deep breath at the gate, looked up at the sky, and muttered just to myself, "Now it's over." Back in Rome, Darren received the email with the notification of the opening of the investigation. But the one who saw it first was Tanya. She opened it, read it, and let out a dry laugh. "Look at that. Even your mother is leaving you now. And do you still want me to stay here, sharing my life with a man that not even her own mother respects?" He tried to argue, but it was too late. Tanya packed her bags the next day, and it was not alone. He took his mother-in-law. The two disappeared without warning, leaving Darren in debt, without a card, without support, and for the first time, with no one to blame. Meanwhile, I made coffee here in my kitchen, watered my plants, and read my red notebook. Page by page, comma by comma, reviewing the road I have traveled so far. There was no hurt, nor anger, just the certainty that sometimes love needs silence to turn into respect. And what freedom! It's when you choose not to carry someone who only knows how to weigh you down. But do you think he stayed at that? Well, no. Darren tried one more thing, something he thought I would never find out. And when I found out, it was the last straw. You will understand why. The news that arrived at Walter's hands came with a bittersweet taste. From Rome, Darren was adrift. Tanya and Candace had done what the ungrateful know how to do best: run away when the party is over. He came down from the hotel room with a swollen face, downcast eyes, and when he got to the lobby, they were already gone. They took their bags, the clothes, even the tablet he used. On the reception desk, only a brown envelope with his handwritten name remained. Inside, a short, cold, direct note. "You are not good for our plans." Nothing more. No numbers. No farewell. Only silence. He tried to chase it. He sent a message to Tanya. He called on WhatsApp. Nothing. He tried to call Candace. Number out of service. He even sent messages to former coworkers, people he hadn't even seen for years. He asked for help. Silence. That same silence that he used so much against me. Now it was the only voice that surrounded him. With no way out, he went to the United States Embassy. He was received with formality and protocol. He had to explain his situation, show documents, report the unforeseen financial events. It was then that he heard what he least expected. "Mr. Darren Holloway, there is a protocol in progress about your name. We were notified by the California Elderly Protection Unit. We will need to temporarily hold your passport while we await more information." That dismantled him. For the first time, he felt firsthand what it is like to have his own name under suspicion, having to answer, to be seen as someone who needs to be accountable. And while all this was happening on the other side of the ocean, here in Inglewood the sky was still blue. The breeze swayed the branches of the magnolia, and I used to make cinnamon cookies, sitting at the table, reading Brenda's latest notes on the legal procedures. With each new message I received from Walter, my soul breathed. Not revenge, but of relief, of justice. It was as if the world was finally putting each piece in its place. And you know, there are things that we live and keep, but maybe, by telling, we will help another heart to breathe. So if this story is coming to you and touching some old wound, enjoy this video, subscribe here to the channel, and let's make this truth reach those who need to listen. Sometimes, a story told saves someone who was almost silent. But even in the face of all this, do you think Darren gave up? Well, no. Pride is stubborn. And before returning, he still tried one last move. The lowest, the dirtiest, and perhaps the most revealing. And it was at that moment that he finally understood who I had become. Want to know what he did? So wait, because you will be surprised. It was all done without scandal. No shouting, no headline, only firm steps and well-filed documents. Walter and I embarked for Washington, D.C. on a cloudy Thursday. The flight was smooth, despite the heavy legs. You know, we get older, and it seems that the body no longer obeys with the same lightness. But when the soul is decided, the flesh follows. We went straight to the building where the administrative hearing would be. A large, cold building, with huge columns that seemed to weigh 1,000 kilos on each one who entered there. It was the kind of place that already makes you think twice about lying. The room was austere. A respectful silence hung in the air. Each person there knew the weight of responsibility they carried. I sat where they asked me, put my briefcase on my lap and waited. Walter explained the main points, delivered the documents, showed the signatures, the statements, the attempts to take goods, the messages. When they asked me if I had anything to say, I looked up, looked at the 3 board members and just said, I just want his name off my bills, and that the state knows what he did to his own mother. They thanked them, took notes, and followed the protocols. No one hugged me, no one cried, no one made promises, and I didn't expect any of that. I went there for dignity, not for drama. And when I left that room, I felt that a whole cycle was closing. For the first time in months, I slept through the night. Across the ocean, in Rome, Darren was summoned to the American embassy again, this time in a smaller room. There, an agent from the consular unit was waiting for him with a thick dossier in hand. It took more than 2 hours to explain each accusation to him. Illegal co-association in a bank account, misuse of resources of a protected elderly, attempt to take assets under fraudulent justification. He turned pale. He tried to deny it. He tried to cry. But the agent was firm. You can acknowledge partial guilt and return to the country, or you will face formal prosecution and indefinite detention. He signed it. He signed with trembling hands, not out of regret, but out of fear. He would return to the United States with the record marked, and without access to my name, to my money, to my story. I was sitting on the porch of my house when Walter told me that the signature had been made. I took the red notebook, turned to the last page and wrote, Silence 1, and he knows it. No, there are moments when we wait a lifetime, but when they arrive, they don't come with fireworks. They come with the calm of those who planted, with the serenity of someone who watered, and with the firmness of someone who no longer needs to explain himself. And I'll tell you something that you may feel on the other side. It's not by shouting that we win. Sometimes it's standing while everyone else waits for you to collapse. But do you think it's over there? He came back, and when he stepped on American soil, he wanted to come to me. He wanted to look into my eyes. But what he saw, it was another woman. Because on that day, I was no longer a mother. I was the page turned. And what happened in that reunion? To this day, no one forgets. Do you want to know how it went? So get ready, because now, the moment comes that changes everything. When Darren finally set foot on American soil, the air felt heavier than any trip he had ever taken. The feeling of returning to the house she had once called home was different. Nothing was as she remembered. The apartment in which he lived was locked. Yellowed letters piled up in the mailbox. His things, his clothes, his books, everything was boxed up, perhaps waiting for some fate that he no longer controlled. Every step he took down the corridor of the building seemed to echo the same question. How did all this turn to dust so quickly? At work, rumors were already circulating. The trust he had once won had dissolved. Colleagues looked away, sent subtle messages, some even mocking. Even social networks, the ones he used to show off a successful life, were against him. A viral video showed the moment of the confrontation at the embassy, where my firm and serene voice contrasted with his despair. Comments from all corners, from people who had never met him, now pointed to his moral flaw, the ungrateful son who lost everything, including his own dignity. He looked at his phone, tried to text Tanya, but there was no answer. He tried to contact his mother-in-law, Candace, but found that he also blocked all contacts. The emptiness he felt was not just financial or material. It was moral, existential. Every corner he crossed in Los Angeles seemed to remind him of who he had been and what he had lost. He tried to go to his mother's house, but stopped in front of the gate. The same gate that, years ago, he confidently walked through, carrying school bags or bringing friends for Sunday dinner. Now, in front of him, he felt small. I didn't have the courage to hit. There was no longer the sound of welcome, no smell of freshly baked cake or steaming black coffee. The yard was silent. The rocking chair I had always used was empty, swaying slightly in the wind, and in that slow, steady movement, Darren saw the full weight of his choices reflected. For the first time, he understood the complete reversal of power. Those who were once in his hands were now above him, firm, serene, untouchable. He realized that it wasn't just the money he had lost. It was respect, presence, history. And as he looked at that house, feeling the lack of any human light, any sign of life that comforted him, a certainty began to beat in his chest. He could never undo the lesson he had received. But could he learn anything? Or would that silent absence be the memory that would haunt him forever? Because the woman he tried to use and deceive, now it existed unbeatably, and he was only facing the consequences. In the last few months, my routine has found a peace that I haven't felt in decades. I would get up early, make black coffee, and sit on the porch, listening to the birdsong mingled with the distant noise of the streets of Inglewood. The house was tidy as I always wanted, every picture in place, every shelf cleaned, every memory carefully preserved. I spent afternoons talking to neighbors, sharing little life stories, or simply listening to the kids running around the yard. I taught a girl in the neighborhood how to make apple pie the way I learned from my mother, slowly, patiently, feeling each aroma rise from the kitchen. Those afternoons filled me with a silent joy, a comfort that no one could take away. I wrote short, precise letters, not to reconcile, but to leave messages that might serve as a guide or reminder for anyone who wanted to learn something about dignity and love without submission. I organized accounts, reviewed documents, sorted personal belongings with affection, not as an inheritance for Darren, but as a gift for those who really deserved it. Friends, neighbors, neighborhood children. Each gesture was a statement. My life now no longer fit in the space he occupied. I didn't need to look for him, call him, forgive him. There was no resentment, only understanding. He had learned his lesson, and I learned mine, that not every bond needs to be saved. Some just need to be finished. Silence became my heritage, my way of teaching without talking, of letting the world understand the weight of choices and the value of an upright life. I didn't run after Darren, nor did I allow painful memories to eat away at my days. Each morning was an opportunity to fully experience what I could still feel: the breeze on my face, the smell of coffee, the laughter of the girl in the kitchen, the warmth of the sun streaming across the porch. Each night was a moment of reflection, closing the red notebook, feeling that I had fulfilled my duty as a mother, a woman, and a person. The world around me continued to turn. I observed the changes in the neighborhood, the neighbors who came and went, the children who grew up. And in every gesture, in every simple conversation, I found meaning. She didn't need Darren's approval anymore. She didn't need signs of love from him anymore. I had conquered something greater, my emotional freedom. But even in that silence, I knew he still remembered, that every step he took, every attempt to remake his life, carried the echo of what he lost. That's it. This was something that no one could erase. The silence was not empty. It was firmness. It was justice. It was a life, lived with dignity. And when the last day arrived, surrounded by flowers that the children of the neighborhood brought, with my red notebook, the envelope with the letters and the knitted blanket between my arms, I felt that everything was complete. I took a deep breath, with the certainty that my story did not need to be told with screams or tears, but with the serenity of someone who knew how to wait, plan, and choose to live with my head held high. But you wonder, did Darren really understand the weight of what he lost? Will it carry, forever, the memory of the silence that I taught without speaking? Because sometimes the greatest teaching does not come from presence, but from absence. And it is in this void that justice reveals itself, without having to raise your voice, without having to make noise. The silence, it is more powerful than any word. Dawn came quietly that night, and I left the way I always wanted, sitting in my favorite armchair by the window, the red notebook resting on my lap. The light wind carried the scent of the flowers in the community garden, which the neighbors had lovingly placed around the house. My departure did not need fanfare, exaggerated screams or cries, only the serenity of someone who fulfilled his role, lived with dignity, and did silent justice. Darren arrived late, his eyes red, and his face marked by the absence of hugs and the weight of conscience. He didn't need an invitation, but no one moved to receive him. The house was calm, intact, filled with the memory of a life of silent love. He approached my body, found the envelope I left for him, and read the words I wrote with a trembling but firm hand. I forgave him, but I knew he needed to learn to forgive himself and not to repeat to anyone what he did to me. The last line read, "If you ever are able to love someone without expecting anything, so my death was not in vain." He left carrying the letter close to his chest, aware that he had lost something he could never recover, the silent love of the only person who had ever betrayed him. And meanwhile, my house remained with that serene feeling of complete peace, the peace of those who left knowing that time, finally, did justice, and that each gesture, each choice, had fulfilled its purpose. I learned, and now I share with you, that life teaches us in unexpected ways. Not all love is about possession. Not all bond is about permanence. There are times when the greatest strength comes from silence, patience, and dignity. Teaching with actions, and not with shouting. Protecting without demanding. Forgiving without forgetting. These are lessons that are valid for any heart that has loved too much, suffered and still chooses to live with its head held high. And perhaps, if I could leave one piece of advice, it would be this. Value those who walk by your side for real, but never underestimate the strength that lives in you when you decide not to lose yourself to please others. And that's why, if you've come this far with me, I want you to know how much I appreciate your company. Each like is like a hug that warms and supports this channel. Each subscription is like an invitation to return together to the next cafe. For more stories that move and teach, comment below which city you are watching me from. I want to feel our community united, spreading stories and experiences that touch us. Activate the bell so you don't miss anything, so you don't miss it when the coffee is ironed again, and you can snuggle here with me whenever you want. Don't go away yet. Listen to the next true story that will appear on the screen. Always remember, each wrinkle tells a story, and each story carries a strength. Watch the next video here on the channel with another incredible story. And come with me to discover how ordinary lives hide courage, pain, and silent justice in ways we would never imagine.